Ben, it's so nice to see your face. I've heard your voice many
You,
times and I've read your words, but to see your face
mm,
and to get to spend an hour with a human who has deeply gone into the lives of human beings that many of us never encounter, it's just a thrill to have you here. So,
oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, it's when I would see you read different episodes and post like comments along the way, it was like I was following the book again with you, which so that was such a really beautiful gift you gave me. So thank you. It's great to be
yeah, you're
here.
welcome. So, for those who aren't familiar with Ben's work, I'm just going to do a very, very quick little synopsis here. Ben actually has a number of serialized novels on Substack and also an amazing project called Same Walk, Different Shoes that explores fiction and the ability to empathize within someone else's story. So, but today I want to just focus on one of his serialized novels called Memory of My Shadow. Did I just say that wrong?
No, that's right.
Okay. All
I
of a
mean,
sudden in my
it's
head, I was
officially
like,
the memory of my shadow, but
the memory
yeah.
of my shadow. Um, so this is then the reason why I wanted to focus on this today is because there are some really thought-provoking themes in this science fiction serialized novel, and for the sake of Unfixed, I wanted to explore these themes with Ben, especially around human fallibility and how it interfaces with technology. And also, in the spirit of Unfixed today, Ben, I just want to let you know we get to take these questions wherever we want. So please don't hesitate to just be like, I'm going to spin this and take it where I want to go, or I'm going to throw it back at you. I don't have an agenda here today, and I know that so you have so many fans, and I think people mostly are just going to want to hear the heart of Ben today and how some of these themes live in you. So I'm just giving you a little bit of a like, whatever, it's chill.
Well, thank you, because I will not answer with any level of perfection. So
Okay,
that's why I'm a
good.
writer. I have time to edit.
Awesome. We're in the same boat then. So let's just start off since there are some people that aren't familiar with you. You have actually a very diverse background that includes music. I think you're playing violin when you were age 5, and technology. But then you ended up being an author. And in just a short intro, can you tell us how did you become an author?
Sure. It's funny. I think I've always kind of been a writer. I just always had a very active imagination, even as a child. And I I started writing a little novel. I thought about this the other day because I did it as a summer project once when I was like 12. It was basically, you can imagine a Goosebumps kind of a book. That's what it was. It was about my life at the time, all the kids in the neighborhood. But I've always had a really strong creative instinct. It's just been a drive for me, and it was expressed in music early on for me. I started playing violin when I was 5, kind of did the Suzuki ear training method and played up to high school, and then switched to guitar and played in bands, did the songwriting thing for the first, I guess, few years after college. I did some regional touring, headlined some shows in Atlanta, played with a number of artists. Then had a baby really early and had to figure out how to make a living at the time because what I earned that year was not was not something that was going to sustain us. So the internet was blowing up. I taught myself some programming, and kind of the rest is history. The next 24, 25 years, I worked in technology, continued to make records, continued to do some writing. But I turned to fiction, I think, really seriously around, I guess, about 14 years ago, 12, 14 years ago. And I haven't stopped. It's just been kind of like I unlocked something in myself that had been waiting for that opportunity.
Wow. I want to know more about what you unlocked, but I think we're going to touch on that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, myself included, will resonate with that because it's such a private process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at least in the writing. And then once we bring it out into the world, there it's not so private anymore. We get the world gets to see us through all these
Right.
different characters. And
Yeah.
okay, so this is a little bit of a leap, but Memory of My Shadow begins with a horrific gun violence.
Hmm.
And of course, in our country, this is unfortunately something that we deal with almost on a daily basis now. What was that like for you to dig into gun violence in order to understand one of your main characters?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was obviously an intentional choice to to not just make that a major theme in the book, but to make it the opening scene of the book. I have always been against guns. Even though I grew up in a rural North Carolina town, which is guns everywhere, I was not raised that way. I was raised as a pacifist, and I think the horror of it has never really escaped me. Just the when someone picks up a gun, it has only one purpose at the end of the day, right? There are other tools like knives, axes, other things that could be deadly, but those things have other utility. A gun was invented for the sole purpose of taking another life, whether it's an animal or whether it's a person. And that to me is just crazy, because humans are fallible instruments, as we're going to talk about with this. The theme of this novel is the fallibility of the human brain, and putting that kind of a tool of destruction in someone's hand that can make it such a quick decision, is frightening. I didn't do a ton of research for this because I think I've always kind of followed it. Ever since Columbine happened, I remember sitting in the office. It was my first real office job. It was around, I guess it was 96 that happened, 96, 97. And we were all stunned. I think everyone was stunned by that event. It was just horrific. And I think that the thing that sparked me to want to write about it, there were two things. One was I had heard an interview with one of the Columbine shooters' mother. This was probably in the last 5 years. And
Yes.
her life obviously has been destroyed because of the event. And just as a parent, trying to understand what she did wrong and having to learn how to forgive herself and to accept that, he was born that way. There was something wired in his brain. You want to blame the parent always when you say, well, they must have been abused, or, there must have been something that happened. In some cases it is, some cases it's not. And just to see up close her level of suffering, and being a parent myself, I can't imagine what that would feel like. So that was one of the things. I think the other thing was the Park Lane shooting that happened in 2018. I can't remember the dates. I'm terrible at dates. 2018, 2019. I remember hearing about it and being momentarily devastated, and then getting sucked into work and doing something else. And it's like, that's the way the world is at this point, and we just accept it. I was like, shit, I really need to spend some time, dramatizing this in a way, in a story that makes it live again for me and maybe for other people. So
Yeah, and you do in your story, you really do. And I think that's, as you did with Same Walk, Different Shoes, it's really important for us through story to enable those experiences.
yeah.
So we're not so numb to them. I
Mm-hmm.
heard that interview too, Ben. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
unless it was a different one, but I
No, I think it was
remember
like Fresh
listening.
Air maybe, or
Yes,
something.
yes. I remember
Yeah.
sitting in a Wells Fargo bank and I had a check to cash and I didn't get out of the car. I was just frozen in my seat listening to that mother talk. It was heartbreaking and confounding to even imagine
Yeah.
what that must be like. And so, of course, what we want to do with these situations is fix them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting leap for me to go from, okay, I work with Unfixed in the chronic illness realm. How do
Mm-hmm.
we extend that into other areas of our lives, things that we can't fix? You described yourself as a fixer. I think in an email or a comment to me over on Substack that if you apply yourself to anything hard enough, you can fix it.
Right.
And Maggie, your protagonist, is a perfect exemplification of this part of you. So obviously, I'm imagining you put yourself into Maggie and we're maybe trying to teach yourself something
Yeah.
through having her plans go awry. I'm not trying to give
Mhm.
anything away, but we can't fix everything. So what were you trying to teach her?
I don't know. I think that I'd like to say that I had a master plan, that it was really thought out, but I really do write fiction as a way to immerse myself in something I want to learn more about. And inevitably, in doing that, I learn more about myself, because you can't write a character and not imbue it with huge amounts of yourself and your experience. So I have thought of myself as a fixer, or someone who thinks they could save a situation or save a person or help somebody, and it's a ridiculous kind of position to be in. I don't know that we choose how we are. We're genetically predisposed. We're raised a certain way. We're born at a certain time. But it's been a lot of how I've positioned myself. I would much rather be uncomfortable myself than put someone else in an uncomfortable position.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a middle seat person instead of an aisle seat person, or rather, I should say, an aisle seat person. So I'd rather get up than make other people constantly get up for me, right? Which is just kind of a
Yeah,
weird.
I can see that both ways, though. The middle seat person's also sacrificing comfort.
Yeah, yeah. But so I think with Maggie, I got to play with some of those ideas of control, because ultimately, I think when you feel like you can fix things or save someone, there's this audacious assumption of control, that you can control things, that
Yeah.
if you think about it long enough, if you apply yourself hard enough, you can fix anything.
Yep.
And that's just not the case. And I think I thought about how perfect a juxtaposition it would be to have a character like Maggie, who is this brilliant computer scientist whose brother was the deadliest school shooter in American history, her twin brother. They shared a womb together. For her to walk away from that catastrophic event, to survive, she had to have some reason to survive. And her reason to survive was, I'm going to apply myself and figure out what's wrong with the human brain. And I'm going to solve it. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to figure out
Yeah.
what causes violence. It didn't start out that way for her. The story starts out, she's really just enamored by artificial intelligence, and like everyone else right now. And it just evolved into that. So she's learning about herself, and sort of the quiet theme is her trying to really recover what was lost of herself and her fear of her own brain. Because you can imagine, if your twin brother is capable of something like that, why would you be any different?
Yeah.
So,
And I can relate to all of that, and through my own body and what I've dealt with this neurological disorder. I was the fixer to a T. I mean, it was like there's a helplessness
yeah.
that we have to face when something in our life is unfixable. And I love that your character Maggie is actually trying to, it's like she's trying to fix somebody beyond the grave even. I mean, she's doing the impossible. I
Yeah.
love that you tried to somehow grapple with a character who believed that she might be able to do that, like she could do the impossible.
Yeah.
And that's how technology right now with AI, I feel like we are sort of encountering this fine line of possibility and potentially maybe fixing things, global warming, or climate change, or human disease, these things that we never thought we could fix. Maybe AI is going to step in. You have a background in technology, and I just am curious, this is a sort of a side
Mm-hmm.
question. Does technology ever celebrate error or weakness or uncertainty? I mean, is there this is a little maybe a techie question, but is there room
Sure.
for error?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think, and I'll answer it in somewhat of a roundabout way. I think what drew me to technology, specifically computer programming, building web applications, mobile applications, was the fact that there was a right or wrong answer. I mean, at the end of the day, computer machine language is binary. Every single thing, no matter how complex a video is or a piece of art or a piece of music, it can be decomposed down to a small series of on and off switches of zeros and ones. Now when you write an application, a program, you can make a lot of creative choices, but at the end of the day, if there's a problem with it, you can debug it. You can run it through an application, and you can go step by step through the lines of code, and you can figure out where the bug is, and you can fix it. And that is an amazingly addictive and powerful thing to be able to do in a world so full of chaos. So when you say, does it celebrate failure? I mean, I think largely failure is celebrated in that it's a learning tool like in anything else in life. There were places I worked where people would have this little trophy that was, I think, a golden pile of dog poop that would go from one desk to another for whoever broke the build for because all these programmers are working together and somebody makes a mistake and they compile it and it goes out there and it breaks everything. So they get the honor of holding the poop for that day. So I think that might be one sort of celebratory aspect of it. But I think the allure for most people getting into technology is just that idea that, you can keep working it until it actually runs smoothly, and it will run forever, barring, some physical catastrophe. The code works and it will continue to work.
Yeah. What a fascinating blend. I mean, you're coming from this very binary world, and then also even music has chords and structure. And then I'm just seeing how you're putting these together through characters and with heart and emotion and fallibility and uncertainty. You even, I mean, I feel like Memory of My Shadow is really about love. So the fact that you're colliding all of these very contrasting elements, what was that like for you to grapple with such extremes? And I know myself living unfixed, I'm always dealing with the complexity of discomfort and peace and these things that seemingly can't coexist.
Right.
So just tell me a little bit about that for you.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I can write a story, whether it's a short story or a novel or a song, that doesn't have the presence of love in it. I think everything at some level is a love story. If you're talking about humans, I just do. It could be the absence of love, or it could be, the abundance of love, but love is always present there to me. So I think I was interested in pulling together a lot of different themes in this book. This was my third novel. The first novel I wrote, Rewind Playback, was very much an autobiographical story about music, about my sort of struggle. And I didn't intend it to be autobiographical. It's just you kind of write what you're feeling and you look back and go, shit, that is my life pretty much, highly dramatized. The second book was a slightly different departure, but also a lot of emotional terrain, dealing with a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and how it affects the rest of their life, how every single thing, is changed from that kind of a traumatic event. So this third novel, I had a little time. I was like, okay, I know I can do it. I know I can write a novel. What do I want to write about? What do I want to immerse myself in? Whenever anyone asks, how do you have the patience to write a novel, or how do you dive into it? And I'm like, how can you not? It's amazing. Like if you enjoy reading, or you even enjoy watching like a really great, well-written television series, and you can't wait every week for the next episode to come out. Imagine writing that thing. So each week or each day, you get to immerse yourself in those characters, and you get to decide. I mean, at some point, the calculus of the story takes over and makes decisions for you, and the characters make decisions for you. But that's also part of the fun. So I set out to figure out, well, we already talked about why gun violence was so important for me to write about as a theme. This was about 5 years ago when I started writing The Memory of My Shadow, and no one was really talking publicly about AI, but working in technology, I had sort of seen the power of what machine learning was able to do, even in its nascent stages of recognizing images. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just like, what if it came in well ahead of all the predictions? What if we're all completely wrong? I heard this one futurist speak at a conference, and he was like, human beings will get it wrong because we are organic biological organisms, and our understanding of evolution is this extremely slow curve. And technology, if you look at it, is like this. It is completely different. You look at the advancements that have happened in the last 200 years, we will be wrong about our predictions. We just will. Because one
Yeah.
thing, it's just like this cascading effect. And you're seeing that come to life now. And so it's an exciting time, and it's a frightening time.
Mm.
So I wanted to bring that forward and say, well, what if it did happen ahead of schedule? The other two things I really wanted strongly were, I wanted to see if I could write from a woman's perspective and a first person perspective, because that's also very hard to do in writing. It is easy to be an omniscient narrator and see everybody's head, but it's different when you're trying to tell a story from one point of view and include all the things that you can't see
Mm-hmm.
in doing that. So, and the last piece of it was nature. Nature is
Yeah.
a huge part of my life, and I am guilty of loving nature porn. I mean, anybody who's a great photographer who spends a lot of time in the woods. I love to hike and camp, so writing about that stuff is a joy for me, and I think those things are all the things that I put into the pot together.
Yeah, and they created such a they nourished the foundation for this very sci-fi landscape. I mean, it actually wasn't a sci-fi landscape; it was a very natural landscape. But these sci-fi ideas,
Mm-hmm.
they held them well, and I actually did see them for a while coexisting
Mm.
together. I also want to bring up one thing too, because I feel like you maybe you don't even know this, but through reading your characters, I feel like you embody Unfixed very well, or at least you have a longing or a desire to understand the complexity. I don't get the sense that none of your characters are very binary. They have a lot of tension.
Mm.
And so, in order for you to write about those, I'm imagining you also have a willingness to go there. And I remember reading on the background of Memory of My Shadow that you also, and I think it was in hindsight, but one of Henry, one of the characters in the story, do you pronounce her Henri or
It's
Henry?
it's Henry. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay. I
yeah.
wanted to give her a French spin or something, or M a French spin. But you talked about how this helped you also understand your daughter who
Yeah.
transitioned
Yes.
later in your years. And that must have been such a powerful and maybe healing
Mm.
process for you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of those things that I'm not a religious person, but the older I get, the more I experience things that I can't fully explain how they happen. I'm not closed off to the idea. I've never been sort of a follower of organized religion. I wasn't raised that way. But I wrote about this character, Henry, who is a non-binary character in the story and plays a really pivotal role for Maggie, the protagonist. He's kind of a mentor and also her partner in this company, and they're trying to create this telepathic AI. So I wrote about this character, and I think even a couple of years before that, I'd written a song about a trans woman. And I was doing all these things, not knowing that my youngest child was grappling with dysphoria. She actually came out to me 3 years ago. And so it was this strange intuitive thing that happens if you're an artist and you're open to things and you're feeling things out, things that you don't even see on the surface happening, because there was no obvious signals. It wasn't like She had suffered from a lot of depression and anxiety for most of her life. But it was never articulated or expressed in a gender way.
Wow.
So I think that's why I didn't freak out when she told me. I took an adjustment, and it was challenging, but it's horrific to me. I know there are parents who disown their children when they come out to them, either simply being gay or trans or queer. And as a parent, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine that. It's just deplorable. I get the fear. I get the fear of the unknown. But yeah, so I think my artistic self had been sort of mentally laying the groundwork and preparing me for it as I was writing these characters and trying to understand it. So yeah.
That's fascinating. And I do believe that our unconscious is picking up on things way beyond our conscious mind is understanding. So in some way, some part of you was preparing yourself for this experience. That's so beautiful. And I can imagine it must have been just very sweet for your daughter to feel that openness from you. And even some of has she read Memory of My Shadow?
She's not. She's
Not
not.
yet.
No, it's funny when you do things. You're still dad, and it's still fairly uncool. Yeah, she's one day she probably will read it. I think she's a brilliant writer in her own right. She's an amazing poet. So I look forward to seeing what she will do with her life.
Wow. So, okay, so back to Maggie, even though so much of Maggie is you and all that has shaped you. If she could go back in time and develop a technology to prevent human suffering, because that's sort of what she endeavored to do, even though originally, like you said, it was just a fascination with AI. Would she do that after everything she learned in your story?
Yeah.
Would she want to prevent human suffering?
I think so. I think if I think about the two things that Maggie grapples with, and I think by extension I grapple with, I think that the solve for humanity, if there is a solve, is empathy. I think if there was a way to put an empathy chip in every single human, so many of our problems would just go away. I just do. I think that is the one thing. And if there is a negative thing that I think destroys most lives, it is control. Those two things to me are thematically what I played with in this story, is just this idea that, we believe we can control things, and everything control comes from fear. Whether you're looking at someone who makes these horrific political decisions to deny basic human rights to people, or take away their reproductive choice, or take away their ability to change their gender. Those are things that are done out of fear, and it's a seeking to control someone else, or even to control ourselves, for people that hurt themselves or deny themselves. So yeah, I think those two things to me, control and empathy, are these two poles that have ruled our societies and caused great harm, and also caused amazingly powerful transitions. With the civil rights movement was, people like Martin Luther King led with empathy. And the reason they were so successful is because they led with empathy. So I guess to get specifically back to Maggie, I think if were she to try and figure out what she would do after this catastrophic failure of unleashing some horrible thing in the world, when she was just trying to understand herself and her brother. And I think, if anything, she would say that, well, she creates a character for herself. And it's kind of funny, we're talking around the edges of this book and no one has any idea what it's really about, but I should drop a little note here to say that one of the core things that Maggie as a creator is doing is she creates these, what they call persona mappings. So imagine there's an AI that is what's called, artificial general intelligence. Now it's sentient. It can comprehend all the things humans can, but it's still a blank slate. It has no personality. It has no past. It has no emotional content. She took it as a job to try and map personalities onto these things. And she maps a personality onto this character, Mila, who's her digital companion. And I think that there is a huge amount of possibility in this idea of digital companions for people.
Yes.
Because, as freaked out as people get, like, I'm going to have an intimate conversation with a machine, or I'm talking to a machine instead of a human. Many people don't have the privilege of having someone who loves them. There are people out there who are so lonely that don't have anyone to empathize with them, anyone to care for them. So if you create a program that can fill that need for people, I think that empathy muscle grows. And I think that, having a machine that can simply respond and say, you're good enough, you're doing a good job, I'm sorry that happened to you. Those are powerful, validating things. And so I think at the end, Maggie did succeed in doing that. That's what she wanted to achieve, because she had that character, Mila, coaching her the whole way through the story.
Yeah, it is a technology that I do think could bring incredible benefit to our society. I There's so many different threads that I want to pull that you just talked about. One of them, though, I think that's fascinating is, okay, you said empathy is the solve, which I absolutely agree, for humanity. Would Mila do anything she could to prevent suffering? Yes. Would we have empathy if there were no suffering? I mean, I'm not trying to get all like philosophical here, but all of a sudden I'm like, well, okay, if empathy really is that joining, communing force that brings human beings to their highest place, and I made into that level of love, is it possible without suffering? If she were to solve human suffering,
Right. It's a good question. I mean, it's a Schrodinger's
there's not
cat
really an
kind
answer,
of a
probably.
question. Yeah. I think that humans, we thrive on adversity. I think that the primary engine or mechanic of the story that, as you understand it as a writer yourself, is if there's no problem, there's no story in most cases. It's not going to be a very interesting story if nothing bad happens, because the nature of to exist is something bad happening. And I think that gets at the heart of what I was trying to explore on the nature of violence. I think that violence exists for a core reason, which is survival. As human beings, we have to be capable of violence to survive. You can be a vegan and you can be a pacifist, but if you're thrown into a wilderness with no means to survive, to eat, and you need protein, you're going to have to kill an animal at some point, which is violence, right? At the end of the day. If you're being attacked, you have to defend yourself. So it's kind of hardwired into us. We're still animals in that respect.
Yeah. It's a hard one to resolve on a planet that thrives in duality. We have night and day. We have cold and hot. It's really a tricky one. And it does make me want to philosophize and maybe think, well, if there were and I'm not a religious person either, but if there were a reason, it would make sense that there's something that is born from the tension of those two opposites, which you're saying is potentially empathy.
Yeah.
What else? I'm wondering, because in the end of your book, Maggie's approach to ending gun violence is very different than her original plan, without giving too much away. And by you writing that approach, what are you saying about the qualities that humans need to cultivate in order to really live well in an imperfect world?
Yeah. Yeah. I think Maggie's conclusion, was just a step away from control. It was to like, okay, I've founded this company that seek to create personalities that could compete with humans or collaborate with humans. And it's done this horrific thing. And I'm going to go back to basics. And actually, the best way to stop gun violence is to educate and provide love. Because, and I think it's funny when you think about the political spectrum and the polarities that we live in all over the world, but particularly pronounced in the US, where you think of people that are like, you'll have to pry my gun out of my cold, dead hands, to people like me who are so adamantly against them and see no value in them at all in our society. I think that the choice is somewhere in the middle when they're talking about, well, it's a mental health issue. The reason it's happening is because it's a mental health issue. And people like me are saying, no, it's fucking happening because anyone can buy a gun.
Yeah.
Right? Or make a gun. And no other country in the world has this problem, but let's set that aside. But it is true. It is a mental health issue at the end of the day. The gun doesn't kill people. The human kills a person. So how do you heal the person before they pick up the gun? How do you do that? So that is the cause to try and, it's not the symptom, it's the cause. And it's a much harder one to solve. And it would be great if all the Republicans actually wanted to solve that problem instead of just using it as a resistance barrier. Because I think that's a much nobler thing to do. Our healthcare system is terrible in this country, and our mental health care system is extraordinarily bad. Yeah. So I think that there's such a stigma around any kind of mental illness. It's challenging.
And I think you're absolutely right that the Maggie's approach in the end, it ends up being about education, love, rallying the resources of a community. It's about these, without giving it, air quotes, it's the social services. It's about these softer sciences that allow us to thrive within adversity.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to that Columbine shooter's mother, Dylan, which we talked about at the very beginning. She spent her life devoted to this problem of educating. And rather than hiding, as anyone would want to do, and feel shame and go into a cave, she wanted to be able to stand up and face the world and say, I failed. You could fail too.
Yeah. Ugh. That is so brave. And so true. I mean, I just got goosebumps when you shared that that is what your story, this is why I wanted to interview you for the story, because there is something so powerful in something failing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to paint rainbows on it and put glitter on it, but I do think that there is unshakable human spirit that can rise up through that. Rubble.
Yeah. Well, you show that in every week in your Substack. It's just beautiful to see the stories that you're showcasing, the voices that you're giving a platform to. It is really a beautiful idea. I love everything about the name and what it means and the duality of the name of Unfixed. We're also keen to have everything fixed, and we're so keen to have things be fixed in a place. And this notion that, the neurological issue that you have is actually, and again, that's a third meaning of it, is you are unfixed. Your head thinks your body is in motion all the time, which I can't imagine how you deal with that every day. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been the greatest teacher, absolutely the greatest teacher on a literal cellular level, because it forced me to find peace within stillness. I mean, it's as simple as that. There's a chapter that I'll write about that comes up around, and I'm not religious, but my husband was raised very fundamentalist Christian. And so he always gives me these biblical stories when I need them. And one of them was about Christ sleeping on the bow of a boat during a maelstrom. And I remember he found a painting of a boat in a storm and bought it for me at a thrift store or whatever. And we hung it on the wall, and I just would stare at it thinking, how do I do that? How do I sleep in this storm? How do I find peace in this storm? And it became like a meditation for me.
Yeah.
that felt like an impossibility.
Wow.
But I do believe that it wouldn't, that peace I feel now wouldn't have been cultivated without the storm. It had no
Yeah.
reason to be cultivated. So,
Hmm.
what a fabulous conversation. I want to encourage everybody to read this story, but also check out all of Ben's other work. I mean, there's especially right now we're in the middle of Harmony House, which is just incredible. And so I want to ask you, how can we support you as readers, other than reading your stories? Is there anything else that is in the works, and
Yeah.
how can we support what you're doing?
I mean, honestly, the greatest gift in the world is having someone be your audience. I never, ever, ever take that for granted. The fact that someone would devote the time it takes to read a novel or listen to my audio narration is such a gift. So that's it. I mean, read the novel, listen to the novel. If you can't afford the $6 a month, or that's a hardship, I have a policy. Just shoot me an email. I will comp you a subscription. I would much rather have you be a reader. As much as I need to pay the bills, which is a whole new reality for me, because we didn't even talk about that, but I walked away from uh, a career, and I'm trying to do an artistic path at this point, which is
Yeah,
scary. But yeah, it's just reading and listening to the work, giving your feedback, sharing it with others. That's what it's all about. That's
yeah,
the real reason to do any of this work.
I believe that, and it will get shared with others. I do believe that your work is exceptional, and you have so many fans,
Oh, thank
truly
you.
fans that aren't just like, cool, what's next, but like, oh, they're feeling these themes deeply. I'm feeling these themes deeply.
Well, can I just tell you that having someone like you that I admire so much in terms of your journey, but also your writing production ability, and there are others on Substack too. If I think about Chloe Hope and Adam Nathan, and the fact that these people read my work and it resonates with them is like the greatest validation in the world. I feel like that it's
Yeah,
such an amazing thing to have your work seen and appreciated by people.
it really is. I want to say one last thing and then we'll close it. Just for those who don't know, Ben, you are such a good, I wanted to say audiologist, and I'm like, no, that's a medical term. Ben narrates his stories also for those who want to listen to them, and not just like reading, but embodying each of your characters. And Harmony House has
Oh my
6
God.
main characters and then a gazillion other characters. And it's fun and wildly kind of like baffling to me that you're able to keep it all straight. But for those who are wanting to like listen to these stories, you can do that too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was out of necessity. I would much rather be able to pay real actors do that. But
You don't have to.
yeah, it's a whole other level of reading your book when you begin to like read characters with accents and different voices. But I think
Yeah.
it's a waste to read a book and not do that. To at least do your best to try and embody the spirit of
Yeah.
those characters. So hopefully it works for people.
It does. It's so fun. And I know I've read others' comments too, and they love this. So,
Cool.
Ben, thank you for this time. What an enriching conversation too.
Oh,
I love how you spun these questions and really made them your own.
oh,
And I think this potentially will live in the hearts of people too that are trying to grapple with violence in our society right now in a different way. So I'm hoping that there's something people glean from this
yeah.
in a
No.
positive way. So
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for giving me this opportunity to chat. I would have done it even if we didn't record it. Thank you.